Hello and welcome to Enhanced Radio Attribution, brought to you by Podscribe. I am Matt Drangler. I'm the head of partnerships here at Podscribe. Great to connect with you here. Thanks for watching. Today we want to talk a little bit about how Podscribe is changing the game in terms of how radio is being assessed, the reporting that's available, how we can turn radio into a more direct response channel for most advertisers. The biggest challenge that we see today within radio is a very fragmented reporting scene. It's really hard to find a singular place where I can see things like impressions and reach, where I can see things like performance reporting. And what Podscribe has set out to do and what we've done is to find a way to make radio performance reporting look and feel like digital. So it allows us to have more real-time insights available to us, and also allows us to kind of monitor things and perhaps give us an opportunity to see what we should be doing next to drive better performance over time. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the Podscribe radio dashboard. What you're looking at here today is a demo account that allows us to see what is radio doing, where is it driving the best performance from a DMA, a format, an owner perspective, and more. And let's dive in on exactly what you're seeing here, so you can sort of understand and see the value of this style of reporting. So first thing to kind of call out here, we're going to go top to down, left to right. Within this reporting view, if you are a current Podscribe user, you're going to notice a lot of similarities in what you're typically seeing if you're running podcast or streaming audio attribution with us today. Namely, this section right here allows us to kind of see, hey, on a daily basis, we could even do a monthly or a weekly basis, how many impressions, how many ads, how many attributed conversions, and any other events that are coming in, how many attributed leads or attributed visits are coming in that are associated with radio. And you can sort of slice and dice this data based on a varying time ranges that can be selected up here. So we got a nice time picture based on 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or a custom date range here. You can also add some additional filters, like if I only want to specifically look at one DMA or one particular day part and really start analyzing there. These filters and time ranges up here will dictate what the data is that's down here. Again, a very familiar concept to those folks that are currently using Podscribe. Another thing to call out here is what is the KPI, or what is the most important metric that we're trying to drive as a buyer. And that might be different from advertiser to advertiser, but the way that we want to analyze this data is flexible such that we can change the KPI to ensure that we're analyzing the data based on what's important to the advertiser. So the first thing to call out here is performance index and how a performance index is calculated. Now, performance index, what it's essentially saying is what share of the end result is being driven by what share of the input. Perfectly simple example to review that. If 10% of my revenue is coming from 5% of my spend, there's a lot of efficiencies there. That would be considered a 200 index, or 10 divided by 5. Looking at this from another lens, if 5% of my revenue is driven by 10% of my spend, there's an inefficiency that's there in that calculation. That's 5 divided by 10, and that would be considered an index of 50. So generally speaking, an index that is 100 or over is at average or above average. Anything that is below 100 is below average. We typically want to optimize out of the things that are below 100 and pour more money into the things that are above 100. Now, how we calculate that performance index might be different depending on the advertiser. And so we can adjust that right directly within the dashboard here. So let's say I'm most concerned about how much revenue is being driven, and I believe that the working metric here should be spend rather than impressions, which is definitely something that we recommend. Then we can adjust the way that performance index is calculated. If let's say we care about leads that are being driven and not revenue, that can be adjusted here. What can be selected is based on the data that is coming into Podscribe. So based on how a site pixel has been placed or how an app integration has been set up, all of those things will showcase here based on the data that's coming in. Same with the exposure side here. So let's say for this advertiser, revenue divided by spend is the most important thing, and we'll hit save. You're going to notice that there is a performance index for a lot of these insights in here. There's also a performance index that we're going to be using to evaluate some of this data, and performance index is something that is natively being calculated within this graph. So everywhere where performance index is being used to assess the validity or the performance of media is being driven by these settings right here. So now that we've set it appropriately, let's kind of dive in on some of the insights that we're seeing. So one of the newest things that is a part of this reporting is this idea of quick insights. So some quick hits that kind of show us what is best and what is worst in terms of performance, broken out by specific data cuts. So one is DMA. So for this particular demo campaign, what we've noticed over the course of these 3 months is that Philadelphia is the most efficient performing market. Los Angeles is the least efficient performing market. Couple of things to kind of call out there. Philadelphia, as I hover over here, I can get a sense of what's the share of impressions, what's the share of leads and conversions, and all of those metrics that could make up the performance index. Because my performance index is being calculated based on revenue and spend, I notice that the share of revenue for this campaign, or for Philadelphia specifically, is about 5.5%, whereas the spend is about 3.2%. So 5.5 divided by 3.2 gives us that 172 index and why it's performing so well. Conversely, when I look at Los Angeles, it's about 4.83% of revenue, but a significant more amount of spend, about 8.4% of revenue. A very simple, easy observation that I can make just by looking at this one little part of the dashboard is we should be spending less in LA and perhaps taking some of that budget and putting into Philadelphia. So very simple, very easy, something that I think we can just quickly surmise just by looking at this. Same thing from a genre or format perspective. News talk seems to be performing less as good as classic rock. And so that's one of those aspects where I can very quickly say, hey, we should maybe shift the budget over to more classic rock and less news and talk. And same thing for owner. So you can kind of get a sense as to how we might be using this data to compare and contrast things, maybe give us a map as to where we could be shifting budget over. Next thing I think is important to call out here is this graph. I did mention day, week, and month. If I were to look at, let's say, just the last month's worth of data and perhaps view this on a weekly basis, I can start to get a sense as to, hey, are we seeing things like a spike of impressions or let's throw on spend here, maybe remove impressions and ads. Is a spike of spend or anything in spend sort of helping to drive an increase in conversions? Well, in here, what I'm kind of seeing is spend is staying relatively flat, and we kind of see conversions are starting to go down a little bit. And so we may want to find where there are some inefficiencies within these campaigns to try and drive sort of that green line to stay sort of consistent, or maybe even to grow up, even with spend staying consistent over time. So we have a good understanding of what we want to do. We want to drive this conversions number higher. How do we do it? By keeping spend consistent. Let's scroll down here and kind of look at some of the ways that we can slice and dice this data and inform what our insights and optimizations are going to be. The first view is to look at it at a DMA level. So if we're buying local spots and not network spots, that's one way that we can help influence better performance over time. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this graph here, and let's just kind of call out what we're looking at. First thing that we're looking at here is the color of states and the color of dots. The color of the states and dots indicate the performance index that again was calculated based on what we set in the beginning of this video. So it's based on revenue and spend. Now, anywhere where I see green, that's where the best performance indexes are. Red is the worst performance indexes. Now, the size of the bubbles that you're seeing, those bubbles indicate DMAs, and the size of the bubbles indicate who has the most impressions. Now, we can change that to be based on conversions, revenue, impressions, or leads. Actually, let's do it based on conversions, because I'd like to see where are sort of the markets where the most conversions are coming in, perhaps not the most efficient in terms of driving conversions. And so what you're going to be looking for is the big dots that are not green. When I see a big dot, let's say is orange or yellow, it means that it's performing below average. And it is an opportunity for us to go away from those places and try to funnel those dollars into where the green states and or green dots are. It's really those that drive the most efficiency and therefore can handle more budget. We may see a lowered efficiency as we start driving more impressions for those marketplaces, but the idea is to be above 100 and to reduce the inefficiencies in the markets where we're not getting enough return on our ad spend. And so that's one really quick way to kind of take a look at and see where should I be reducing money, ideally from the big bubbles that are red and yellow and orange, and putting them into the big green bubbles or even the small green bubbles where we have a lot of efficiencies that are playing out. It's a nice, great, easy way to kind of see that. This is one way to analyze that data. I can go bubble by bubble or state by state. We also have a table view that will allow you to kind of generate some understandings of which DMAs are performing better in, let's say, an ordered list. So let's say cost per purchase is probably one of the more important things that we want to think about. El Paso, Alexandria, Boston, Davenport, all of these DMAs seem to drive a really efficient cost per purchase. Everything at the top of this list now that I've sorted it greatest to least, is driving the least efficient cost per purchases. And so this is where we probably want to reduce some spend. So there's another way that we can start looking at this data visually on a graph via that DMA graph, or just within a table, and we can sort of order columns greatest to least and least to greatest. So that is DMA level analysis, very beneficial and helpful as we are looking at our local buys and how we might adjust those local buys. Now, let's say if we're doing network buys. Network buys obviously are typically national, and from our perspective, there's a few other ways that we can sort of look at this data to kind of help inform what we should be doing next. So first of all, let's look at this performance by owner or publisher. So right now I have some very specific columns in here, and actually I'm going to adjust this view. So because revenue and spend is what's most important to us, I want spend and revenue to be those two columns, and then performance index, which is the division of share of revenue divided by share of spend, to also be there. And the next thing I want to do is I want to sort performance index highest to lowest. So a couple of things to look out for. So anyone that's near the top of this list with a green bar for performance index is performing quite well. Anywhere where we see yellow or red bars for performance index is where we can start diving in and making the most significant changes when considering those line items that have a very high amount of total spend. So a really good example here might be Good Karma. Good Karma operates with a very low performance index. I'm putting a lot more spend in based on the revenue that we're getting out. And if I look at the total spend bar, that pink bar there, anywhere where I see a fairly large pink bar where the performance index is red or yellow, hey, that is the indication that I need, or perhaps a place where I could be shifting budget. So shifting budget away, potentially away from Good Karma and into some of these other performing these other places or these other owners is sort of where the direction of budget potentially could go to try and drive more efficient and effective performance. I see that same thing with Odyssey. Is there going to be a big shift in performance if I take that budget away from Hubbard and put it elsewhere? Probably not, because it's only 0.1% of spend. So really finding those owners that have a high share of spend is the most important aspect of isolating what's working and what's not. So that's the owner side of things. But what if we wanted to look at day part? Let's take a look at day part, and that might help to influence our network buys as well. So I now have this looking at day part. I have it sorted again by performance index, greatest to least, and I'm seeing overnight is the worst performer, even though that accounts for 19 to 20% of our spend, certainly where some of the cheapest impressions come in. So there's a very large amount of cheap impressions here. Maybe it doesn't make, maybe this is our reach portion of our campaign, and it's okay that we're not getting a lot of performance out of here. Or maybe this is a dragger. This is the thing that causes us to not hit our cost per goals, and we want to ask all of the publishers to not clear the ads overnight if they don't clear during their typical time, right? So there's a couple of thoughts here. Noticing in here that PM drive is really close to average. I don't know that I would shift much there. The 99 index is pretty much average. So not a lot of shift, but certainly midday and weekend seems to be an opportunity for shifts to be made to go more towards evening and AM drive, maybe even a little bit more in PM drive. So really great views of the data there. Other ways to view this data, we could do it specifically by actual radio station. We can review this data. We can review this by format. So here's the formats here within this campaign. We're noticing that sports is like the lion's share of the spend here, with about a quarter of all spend, yet it performs the worst. So recommendation to kind of take those dollars and maybe spread it out across these other various formats here. ISKI code or creative code is another, and so on and so forth. So you start to get a great understanding of what's working best, what's not working best by clicking a couple of buttons, sorting things, and interpreting what we're seeing on the graph. So that is the histogram graph here. Final thing that I'll leave you with is, although it's great to have this information within a dashboard view, I just want to make sure that I remind everybody, getting data out of Podscribe is a very easy process. To review your campaigns and analyze your campaigns can be, let's say, plugged into your own data visualization tools. And you're going to notice in here that we have a Generate Report tab that we can quite literally generate reports based on all of these different levels and data cuts, based on aggregate, which would be based on the time frame that's selected here, or on a monthly, weekly, or daily basis. So all of these things can be set up as a one-time report. In the near future, we'll also be offering scheduled reports where this report can be sent to you in a CSV format directly to your email address or an S3 bucket and things of that nature. But these reports can be generated and the data can be exported out of the radio report. So that's it. That is how Podscribe today is trying to bring radio sort of into the 21st century, make it look and feel like digital. So we as performance marketers can dive in on what's working, what's not working, and influence what we could be doing next. Thank you very much for reviewing this with me, for spending the time watching the video all the way through. Definitely make sure you like and subscribe on the Podscribe channel to get more walkthroughs like this. If you want more information on how to get started, you can reach out to partnerships@podscribe.com. More than happy to walk you through this live. I'll give you a chance to kind of poke and prod, and that's it. So thank you again. See you next time.